Hi everyone, Deb here, and this is the fundamentals of Photoshop basically, and what I'm going to do is put together a few videos that give you a little bit of an overview and a review of the classes, different parts of the classes that we have. Photoshop's such a great program, it's one of my favorites, and I spend a lot of time in Photoshop and I work in it a lot, so hopefully I'm going to help you take those steps to where you'll be able to utilize it to do a lot of different things. Anyway, in our first class, we basically covered several areas. The strength of Photoshop is in its layers, its design palettes over on the right, when you're looking at the overview of how it's all put together. Is on the right-hand side here, you'll see these design palettes. On the left-hand side, and here again, these are all designed to be customized, so you can move them around however you need to, is your basically your tool palette. And then across the top, depending on which tool you have highlighted, you'll see a toolbar that's kind of customized for that specific tool. Anyway, we worked a lot in class with our Move tool, which is the four-sided arrow tool. And that one, when you move over into your document, you'll notice that the arrow or your pointer, it has that four-sided arrow. And that always means that you're in the Move function. If you click on the tool below it, it's the rectangle marquee tool. And that's for, you'll notice when you move your mouse back into your graphic or your picture or whatever, you'll notice that you have kind of a crosshair, and it looks like just a square area there. And basically what that does is select certain parts of whatever layer you're working in. And then we'll be working with a lot more of these different tools as our classes proceed. So anyway, I don't want to get stuck too much. I kind of want to go through this exercise that we went through in the first class so that you get a chance to kind of see what we were covering. Anyway, if you'll notice, the graphic that I opened it has a really nice, looks like a water background, and it has several different flowers in the picture, and it has some text in it. If I go over and I take a look at my layers, okay, which is where I want to go over to kind of take a look at what's going, I'll notice that I have one layer here at the bottom that's called background. And as we get into working with more documents, you'll notice that if you're opening up a picture that you've done, you're always going to have a locked layer. You'll see there's a little lock there. Basically, I recommend you kind of keep that there. Anytime Photoshop is opening a document, it has to have a reference point. So the first layer is usually, when you're opening up an existing graphic, will be locked. If you need to do anything to that layer, you can always unlock this by double-clicking on that layer. And you'll notice that what happened when I double-clicked on that layer, it highlighted, and it also brought up a menu that gave it a new name. It says Layer 1. And if I say OK, the little lock disappears. So I now can actually edit that layer. So in your photographs, when you're pulling photographs in, if you're working with photographic images, basically a lot of times when you open up the first time, you'll notice there's a lock there. And it's because Photoshop needs to have that baseline reference point so that it can base all of its analysis from that point. So, but in this particular exercise that we're working with, you'll notice we have layer 1 that has the background. Okay, and layer 2, or the next layer, is titled, and it's titled 3 Pansies. And if I click on that layer, and if I make sure that I have my Move tool highlighted, I can move into the document, and it doesn't matter where I put my mouse. If I click and hold, I can move whatever is on that layer. Same thing if I go to the next layer, which is called azaleas, and I can move whatever is on that layer. And that's the strength actually of what Photoshop can do for you, is that by working with images in different layers, you can have different impacts on them. And so the Easter lily, same thing. I can move that around and all over the place if I've clicked and highlighted that layer. Also with the text, you'll notice that when we get to the text layers, they look a little different. They have a T in them. Normally in your regular graphic layers, you'll notice that there's a little checkerboard back there. That means that it's transparent. There's nothing else back there. Notice on layer 1, it's completely covered because that layer is completely covered. So once you kind of get used to knowing how these, feeling a little more comfortable with your layers, I think you'll see that it basically does exactly what you ask it to do. And sometimes if you get stuck in, and I do too, it's primarily because I haven't asked the right question. So I just kind of have to back up and then start over again. Anyway, to start out with, I think what we did in class is we worked a little bit more with our layers, and we worked with the azaleas. So I'm going to, if you'll notice in your layers, you've got little eyes. And when the eyes are highlighted, okay, they show when you turn them. If you want to turn that layer off because you want to focus in on a certain part, you can click on the eye and that'll turn that layer off. Now, if I click on my azalea layer, because we're going to do a little work with the azalea layer, notice that the order in which these layers are, basically you start at the bottom and you have a bottom layer, and each layer above that, okay, layers on top of it, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Let's say we want, we have this first set of azaleas. What I'd like to do is have a bouquet of azaleas. So what I can do is I can right click on the layer and go up and duplicate it. And it comes up and it brings up the menu and it asks me what do I want to name it. Well, let's call this, instead of azaleas copy, let's call it azaleas 2. And I'll get rid of the copy there. And so now we have the second layer that looks that says azaleas. Now, if you notice the picture, I can't see any difference. I just see the same thing. That's because when it duplicated the layer, it duplicated it exactly. So if I want to move this out of the way, I have to be in that layer. So I've selected it. It's going to be highlighted. And then I move my flowers over. You'll notice also that it's on top of the other layer because it's above the layer. I'm going to right click now and I'm going to duplicate again. And instead of, this time I'm going to call this azaleas 3. Well, it's got copy 3 there, doesn't it? There we go. Okay. And now I have a third layer. So now I have 3 layers that are active. And what I'm going to do is move them around. Okay. And once you've got your layers, you know, right now it just looks like I've got 3 of the same layer highlighted. So what I probably need to do is tweak this layer. So I'm going to start with my layer 3. And the next thing I want to do is I want to kind of turn it. I want to kind of rotate it around and maybe resize it a little bit so that it doesn't look like it's exactly the same layer. So I'm going to go up to my menu bar. Okay, notice you've got all these different, you've got my design panels, my tool palette, my tool bar, and my menu bar. So I'm going to go to edit because I'm going to edit that layer. That's how I kind of think about that. And what I want to do is I want to free transform. I could transform and just rotate. But if I free transform, that allows me to rotate and resize and do some other things, do everything all at once. And so that's what I'm going to try. And you'll notice that what happened was I now have a little box, resizing box around that. If I move my mouse around slowly, you'll see that the little arrows, instead of my 4-sided arrow, I have a double-sided arrow, and it changes shape depending on where I am moving around that object. And so what I'm going to do, I usually, when I'm going to rotate something, I usually start from the diagonal. And I'm going to rotate it around so that now that is turned that way. And so then I'm going to resize it. And what you can do if you want to resize it all together is hold down your Shift key and then hold down from one of the resizing points there. And you reset it, and that makes it a little bit smaller. So now I've got some rotation there, and I've resized it. So now that I like that, I want to keep that. Up here on my toolbar, notice I'm in my on the layer there. I can either click the check mark for confirm the transform, or I can just click to my move tool or to any other tool on the palette. And what happens is Photoshop's going to come up and say, are you sure you want to do that? And then I'm going to say, yes, I want to apply that. One thing you'll find out in working with just about any software is there's probably about 3 or 4 different ways to do everything. So as you get used to it, you'll realize that you'll kind of find the way that's most comfortable for you. So anyway, now I have that layer tilted the way I want it, and I'm going to go back now to my second layer. Now I can turn that off. Whoops-a-daisy, let me get this double-click too fast. There we go. I can turn this layer off if I want to get it out of the way for right now, and then focus on the second layer. And let's move that. Here's the second layer. So what I'm going to do here is the same thing. I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform, and then I'm going to rotate it the other way, and then resize it. Okay. So now I've got it slightly over my base azalea there. And this time I'm going to go ahead and confirm by checking the commit to the transform. Now notice that there's 3 other buttons here. The middle button says don't apply it, cancel the transformation, and it'll go back to where it was before. But I'm going to go ahead and commit. So we've got the commit there, and so now I have this layer. Now I can actually go to my first layer. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Actually, if you double click on that, it wants to give you some blending options that you can do. Sorry about that. Anyway, I can go to my first layer and also transform that one a little bit. Just give it a little skew so that it's off kilter a little bit there, and maybe resize it a little bit too. So that now when I confirm that and I turn on all my layers, whoops, there we go, and come back up to my top one and pull it in, I have a nice little cluster. I have a cluster of azaleas there, and that's kind of what I was going for in that particular part. So now pink is nice, but what if we wanted to change the color of that set of azaleas and maybe have a different set of colors? Well, the neat thing about Photoshop is whatever I do to this layer, okay, I can impact the whole layer. And if I want to, as long as I've clicked on this third layer, I'm going to move it so you see which one it is. Whoops, there it is. Okay, I'm going to go up to the image and I'm going to make an adjustment. Okay, so under the image menu, I'm going to go down to adjustment, and I'm going to go to hue and saturation and see if I can tweak the color a little bit and change it. So if I bring up the hue and saturation menu and then move it around a little bit, you're going to see that it starts to change color. And it affects, right now, I'm using the master colors. And so the master is a combination. I think we talked in class about working with red, green, and blue, RGB, for an electronic format, for coloring format. And so this, when I work with the master, that means it's adding and it's basically averaging, okay, all of the colors of that red, green, and blue. And so now I've kind of got a new color there. And so I'm going to say, ooh, gee, that's kind of a apricot color. So I'm going to say, okay. But I'd like to make it a little sharper. See, it looks a little duller. So if I want to make it a little sharper, I come back to my image. So I've made one change to it. I'm going to go back to my image, and I'm going to use what's called the curves. Because the curves feature allows me to work with exposure and work with contrast, okay, a little bit more. This gives you an overview picture of how intense that particular layer is, the image that's on that layer, how intense it is. And you can see that it's a little dull. So I can either make it a little lighter, I can make it darker, okay, or I can, once I've made my point and I've established a point there, I can click in the middle here and work a little bit with, see, I'm now in a different area, and that made it a little brighter. And that's kind of what I want to do with that particular part. So now I'm going to say OK, and I like that part. So now I'm going to go to Azalea 2, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to go to first my hue and saturation. And this time I'm going to go down this way and check the colors out. Ooh, I'm now into a more violet purple color. And so if I want to make it a little brighter, I'm going to saturate it a little bit more.